Mikki Janower is a designer, a researcher, an art director. She is a designer with Squarespace specifically, but also she maintains an independent practice, a little side hustle, which is amazing. We are so delighted to have her here at our very first Circle Live. Hey, Mikki, how's it going?
Howdy, I'm great. I'm fresh back from Miami Art Week and I have no tan to show for it. How are you?
I'm doing fantastically. Miami Art Week, is that very different from Art Basel? Is that the same thing?
It is centered around Art Basel Miami, but there are a lot of satellite shows like the New Art Dealers Alliance and Untitled that are no less worth going to.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, you obviously get around in the art and design world. Really quickly, though, I would love for our audience and for our sake as well to get a sense of your background. How did you go from being just a regular person to being a designer, and then going from being a designer to becoming a Squarespace designer?
Totally. Well, I've never been a regular person. I started as a bookworm. I really liked words, so I really liked the visual systems that make words make sense. I got my start in the Boston DIY music scene, making posters for musicians. And since then, I've worked with clients of all kinds. I came here via the New York Times, where I was helping to renegotiate print standards. And now I am at Squarespace talking about websites all day. And I take on all kinds of challenges here, from business cards to immersive digital landscapes for Bjork.
That is super cool. And yeah, if you haven't checked out the Squarespace Icons campaign that started with the Bjork website for Bjork's new album, definitely check that out. You'll see some of Mikki's work up front and center. Really impressive work there, Mikki.
Thank you. Tired of looking at it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I feel like you have a lot of the same feelings of designers in the audience here today. All right, so let's talk about design trends. Actually, I'm going to toss it over to Sarah now to sort of focus the conversation around design trends.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. And thanks, Mikki, so much for being here. Seems like we got some Miami Art Week fans in the audience. So cool that you got to bring that to this discussion as well. Mikki, you're such an incredible designer, and we are so lucky to have your expertise here. Yes, little hearts. Can you start off by just telling us, like, what are design trends and why do they matter?
Totally. I guess I would define design trends as approaches, formats, media, and motifs that become popular and then start to appear more commonly in the work we do. Keeping up with trends and keeping ahead of trends gives us time to understand their sociocultural contexts and learn best practices for their execution, and generally just develop more thoughtful and informed work in conversation with the zeitgeist.
Oof. Well, that is probably better than I've ever described anything in my life. So thank you so much for that. Sam, given that context, are we ready to kind of get into what our predictions are for 2023?
I sure feel like this is the right time to do it. So I'm going to share up on the screen the awesome blog post by our compatriot and colleague Ariana Frederick on the 2023 trends in web design, aesthetic design trends. Basically, how we're going to work this is Sarah and I are going to go back and forth with each one of the trends. We're going to toss it up into the air, give it a little bit of a prep, and then Mikki, just ask you to respond. Mikki, how does that sound?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. So let's start with this one here, which is very near and dear to my heart. And once again, you can all read this blog post on the Squarespace blog, pros.squarespace.com. Y2K, a nod to the early days of the internet boom. 2023's Y2K aesthetic is a fresh approach to the nostalgic optimism and energy of the early 2000s. I remember Y2K. I recall it as kind of a scary time. Everyone thought that the whole world was going to shut down, and then it didn't. So to me, it's kind of interesting that this trend is so colorful and bright and positive. What do you think, Mikki?
I actually think that our interest in Y2K is part of a sort of broader movement toward pastiche. And I mean, our present is ecologically uncertain and the future is untenable. So we turned to homage to reminisce about simpler times and to be cheeky and smart. So I get why we're kind of revising our Y2K panic and instead leaning into this sort of fun, bright, old internet aesthetic.
I think that's a good thing. To be clear, I think that's awesome that we're revisiting it this way. It's just whenever I see Y2K, I always think about clocks stopping across the world and Wall Street shutting down. I mean, I love the aesthetic of this. I love all the GIFs. I mean, I remember, regardless of how you pronounce the word, I remember when they first appeared, and it was like all of a sudden a video can be contained within a single image. Mikki, like, how do you think that this particular aesthetic could be applied in just a couple of phrases, ideas, and images?
Well, that's complicated because I think there are a lot of different ways you can approach the sort of Y2K umbrella. You can go tabloid chic, like the very sparky, spunky kitsch of a recent cover for The Verge by Alana Schlenker that I will link to in the chat. You could go kind of cybersexual and reference our early aughts visions of cyberspace and its potential, or you could go indie sleaze, which is of course back. There are a lot of ways to do any of those things. I think Rhizome's Internet Art Archive is a great digital resource. Another place to look is ... a defunct critical design magazine from that era.
Fantastic. And I know how much you like magazines. We've talked about this before, how much we both individually love print media. All right, so that's the first design trend. Exciting. I can't wait to find out about the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say at Y2K, I love, you can just tell in that GIFs image, so reminiscent of what Olivia Rodrigo is doing today, talking about artists who, you know, we predicted were going to be big. I mean, shout out to my girl, Olivia, and her Y2K. Girl was not even alive, but that's okay. All right, moving on to our next trend, which is brutalism, which, Mikki, for me, like exclusively is represented by Boston City Hall. I don't know if anyone here is joining us from Boston or has visited Boston before, but if you do a quick Google for Boston City Hall, you'll just see what looks like a big block of cement, and it just screams brutalism. So what does that mean for the internet? What does that mean for design, Mikki?
Well, Boston is my hometown, and that is exactly what I think of as well. Brutalism architecturally, this like very material structural approach had its roots in access and community care with an eye towards social housing. And in that tradition, web designers like Laurel Schwaltz are minimizing styling in favor of system defaults, which makes UI easier to assemble, scale, and disseminate. But like architecture and like, you know, the Boston municipal government built its fancy city hall in the style, brutalism was eventually adopted by elites and academics. And art imitates art. In design, the same thing has happened. The Institute of Design has a really great typeface ID display where each glyph is broken down into its modular segments, and that's maybe in the more high art, inaccessible end of the brutalism spectrum. To do brutalism, to sort of implement brutalism in our work, I would recommend knowing the rules before you break them, building and typesetting a really tight system first, and then strategically dismantling pieces of it.
It's interesting because in some of these images that we're seeing on the screen, where is the line, do you think, between like simple and then like intentionally in this style? You know, on that slide that we're seeing with the minimal elements, it's just text on a page. Where do you think it like goes, kind of ventures into like, this was intentionally designed in a brutalist style instead of with no styling at all?
I think that things look intentionally brutalist as opposed to unintentionally sloppy when the system is otherwise really tight. So when you're using a really consistent modular grid system, when you're using typefaces that are clearly system defaults or sort of in that tradition, if the palette is maybe bare but thoughtful, if there's a lot of emphasis on the material and structural character of the piece, then when you know, overlap something, it looks really thoughtful and deliberate as opposed to just like a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It sounds like it's really about consistency, and knowing what you're doing before you get into it. Is that right?
Totally.
Totally. All right, Sam, back to you.
Awesome. Brutalism, I'm glad to hear your perspective on that, Mikki, because to me, it's definitely the most confusing and I don't understand it enough, but I'm not sure I still understand it, but I'll rewatch this video and I will get there, I promise. Next, 90s nostalgia. Perhaps this goes hand in hand with Y2K. What do you think, Mikki?
I think it's another symptom of our tendency toward pastiche for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of those bright colors, primary colors. Do you think that there are any major differences as to why this could be a separate design trend from Y2K?
Yeah, I mean, the 90s has a lot of its own subcultures and aesthetics, like vaporwave and acid graphics, which have been in for the past few years and which I find a little exhausted, and like really nostalgic Space Jam era UI, which is great. And there are some great examples of that on the internet right now. Pixel type is pretty hot right now within the 90s vernacular, and ASCII art as well. Very
Oh my
nice.
gosh. Oh my gosh. What is ASCII art? I know what ASCII art is, but I'm not sure anybody else does.
ASCII art is like an image making process where people use the symbols and punctuation you can access on your keyboard.
That is super cool. Yeah, if you search ASCII art, I think it's ASCII art. Is how you spell it?
I just sent it in the chat.
Fantastic. Yeah, if anybody wants to see, that's I'm sure there's some great stuff that Squarespace designers could be doing on that front. Definitely near and dear to me. So I don't want to dwell on the 90s because, you know, not everybody has an attachment to it in the way that I do. Sarah, what's up next?
Yeah, and McKenna was right. I did try to dress on theme. Say I'm not sure if you're going for brutalism or what Mikki is going for, but I was definitely going for 90s with my sweatshirt today. All right, let's keep it going. If you want to scroll on down, Sam. Our next theme is rave. And as someone who I can't say I'm a physical rave attender, but you know, rave on the internet seems like a slightly calmer and more inviting way to participate in the concept. Mikki, what can you tell us about rave for web design?
Totally. I mean, as a techno listener, I'm appreciative of the rave ethos as it appears in design. I think rave culture promotes a good balance of expression and practicality. You're wearing stainless steel jewelry, hands-free bags, movable clothes. Rave design systems walk the same line between inventive and flexible. Budgets are small and needs really varied, but you want to push the discipline to its extremes to do the music justice. A lot of really iconic rave flyers also push back on tenets of commercial design. They appropriate pop culture touch points, or they use really analog media like collage. And that, I think, is how we can really call back that aesthetic in our work.
Nice. And now that we have Fluid Engine, more of that collage style, I think, is really unlocked for Squarespace designers.
You can do things in Fluid that would take me all day to code. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Awesome. Thanks for that positive endorsement.
Do you have a little bit of coding background, Mikki? Can you do some code?
I do. I coded my website from scratch. It took forever and I deeply regret it. My engineer friends are not allowed to look at my code because it is likely not up to industry standard.
You know what? I think that in design, you can take a little bit of creative license, right? That's always a way out. All right, so this is another one that I think I had understanding of going into this blog post, but I loved the way that this took me in kind of a different direction. So Metaverse, our world obviously is changing, and obviously there are companies which we will not name that are focusing so much on the metaverse. In fact, by just saying that, I think I probably mentioned the company name. We'll talk about it later, but this is sort of the broad idea of the metaverse, and thinking about like the virtual reality, thinking about these, bringing a realistic experience to the multi-dimensional components, mixed media and chrome textures. I think I know what some of that means, but Mikki, once again, I'd love some of your guidance as far as what metaverse means for design.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of mixed media and texture in the digital space is really exciting. What I'll add is that the sort of digital age has demanded a renewed emphasis on motion. Because the Instagram algorithm is really privileging Reels and TikTok has become a pretty vital communications channel, we've seen a lot more visual tool belts that come stocked with motion profiles, like the MoMA rebrand, which has a custom motion algorithm and a really characteristic set of moves, and Porto Rocha's brand identity for Vivo, which is designed to unfold dynamically in motion. So I think as we lean further into metaverse, we'll be seeing a lot more motion design.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before with metaverse, just creative ways to capture motion. You mentioned some, but what are some other ideas maybe you can offer for creative motion design? Maybe even things that can be accomplished within Squarespace.
Yeah, I mean, in Squarespace, I would say adding lots of scrollable and dynamic elements to your site is a great way to start. If you have any code background and you're willing to brave the wilds of the custom code block, you can code some animation or parallax into your site and build in items that sort of like move and engage with the user as they scroll around.
Love that. Love that. Well, this has been such a fantastic journey. We are in a second going to be able to open it up as a Q&A to Mikki and to us if you want to ask us questions as well. So anybody in the chat, if you have any questions, the best place to put them would be in the Q&A box, just so that we know that it's there. You can open up the Q&A box and we'll see your questions. But we also have McKenna who's patrolling the chat, and I'll do a little quick one through the chat as well to see if I can find any questions. But first, before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to Ariana Frederick, our colleague, who put this awesome blog post together that all of you can now go and visit and look through and share with your clients in a newsletter, create a video about. I think that this is just a really great opportunity for you to start off your own conversations about design trends with your clients and make yourself look like the pros that you are. That's what we were hoping with this blog post. But also, even before we do the Q&A, one more thing. Again, because this is a Squarespace show, we do have to give a nod to our main sponsor. Sarah, would you like to take on the next promo?
Yes, this show is also sponsored by the Circle blog, which you all are now familiar with, having just seen the Web Design Trends blog post. I personally read every single blog post that comes out. We are just so lucky to have that as a resource. And again, really just like wouldn't promote anything I don't use myself. So really just want to give a big shout out to the Circle blog. And you can use my code www.pros.squarespace.com for free access to the Circle blog. I just want to say Circle blog is powered by readers like you. So thank you.
Absolutely. I read the Circle blog every day, and I pay attention to the links that come through in the newsletter and release notes. So happy to have the Circle blog as a sponsor of this show. So back to Mikki. We've got some questions right now in the Q&A. I'm going to throw this first question out, but we've got one right now from Simone. Can you think of and share any educational or nonprofit institutions that are using any of these trends yet? If any nonprofit institutions or designers are in the chat right now, feel free to share the links to those sites. But I'm going to try and think of some that I can think of. But Sarah and Mikki, if you have any ideas for institutions or nonprofit that are using any of these trends, feel free to shout out those.
Arts institutions tend to be a little bit ahead of the curve on these trends, particularly contemporary art institutions. If I was going to do some research for this right now, I would start looking at Kunsthalls, non-collecting museums, typically in Scandinavia or parts of Europe. And that is the first place I would look. The Luminary in St. Louis tends to have pretty on-trend design. Untitled Art Fair in Miami Beach has a very brutalist website. It's all Times New Roman, very simple.
Some great ideas for how to search and also some specific things to search for. Next question from Brad we have is, what is the going rate for designing a custom Squarespace site? I'm sure it varies. That's a question that I'm gonna actually put to the chat. There's such a variation on questions on prices that people use. If anybody, any other Circle members are willing to share or want to share like a link to where to connect with you on LinkedIn, that's a great question. Even also to actually put into the forum. I know that McKenna shared a link to the forum again. Actually, McKenna, if you could please share a link to the forum again in the chat. That's kind of the reason that we have that, because we're not the expert on all of the various prices that people use for their businesses. Go ahead, Sarah.
Maybe this is just a good quick moment to just plug our Circle Day hub, which if you don't attend Circle Day or aren't familiar with it, it's now our annual conference that we run to really gather our whole community in one place. And one of the great sessions that came out of that was by David Alex on how he builds, how he gets like 10K projects that clients are paying $10,000 for, but he talks about, that high end, but he also kind of talks about how you get to that point. And as he built more sites, how he felt comfortable raising his prices. And so that is a great way to also get a little bit of a guideline on how much you should or could consider charging at each stage. So maybe we can get McKenna to drop the link to that as well.
Yeah, and our colleague Will Minter just dropped in a blog piece about pricing your services. So a lot of good resources out there. Here's a really fun question from Christy Price. Can we expect some templates that have these trends? And a shout out to you, Mikki. The Bjork template was really cool.
Thank you. We can. I can't say more than that.
Can't say more than that. All right, fair enough. Sometimes we got to keep things under wraps until we reveal them. All right, we got a question here from Chad Carmack. How do you balance simple design and some of the trendy, less simple designs? Thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think with any of these trends, it's important to use them on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes you want things to be 99% invisible, and in that case maybe some of these trends aren't right for you, and sometimes you would rather actually compromise the simplicity of a layout in order to make it a little bit more cutting edge, and that can sort of help to position you via your audience, in many cases being a little bit less standard and less predictable, and asking the audience to kind of meet you in the middle and engage with you and your content is actually a great strategy as opposed to simplicity. I think that line is all about your client's desired positioning, and it's important for you to discuss with them.
Definitely. And I think as part of the first client conversation, you can totally ask them about their positioning. You can totally say to them, just to use your language, Chad, you can say, are you looking for something trendy? Are you looking for something less simple? And not to mention, going back to the pricing question, if something ends up being less simple and more trendy and staying on the trends, then you can charge more for that. You can say, this is going to take me some extra custom coding. So that's something that I know that a number of Circle members end up adding as part of a new package. We got one from Jenny. Please tell me what AR interaction or engagement you've seen recently in terms of art orgs in either app-based or websites. Are you building Web3 sites yet?
Archive, ARKIVE, is a decentralized art platform that I've seen discussed recently. I myself am not involved in Web3, but I'm sure if you look around, you'll find some great examples.
Yes. There's a lot of definitions of Web3, I will posit, and that there's a lot of things that, so definitely when going into Web3, I would caution anybody to do some research into what actually it means, and the various ways of describing it. Let's see. Next, we've got from Michael. We're currently trying to have good up-to-date design at my nonprofit called One Collective. Oh, okay. That seems like it was maybe an answer to one of the other questions. I'm going to actually take this and I'm going to add it to the chat. Sarah, do you want to read out, while I do that, Sarah, do you want to read out Barbara Day's question?
Yeah, I'd love to. All right. Mickey, Barbara says that she would love any more examples of blocks to use for the various styles and then how you would suggest using them.
Ooh, let's see how many blocks I have at the top of my mind. I should add the caveat that I'm not a product designer. So blocks are not actually something that I am building, but they are things that I am using. I think, frankly, in terms of brutalism, Fluid Engine is your answer. If you want those overlapping images, you can do that with Fluid. There are little like bring to front, bring to back controls you can use to decide what overlaps what and what is overlapped. In terms of blocks, I think some of the playful image masking is a great way to lean into this sort of nostalgic old internet trend. And then the shaped blocks are helpful for just funky 90s energy.
Yeah, I'll add some as well. I think a lot of the background effects for sections in 7.1 could be really great for the rave theme. And something that I've loved doing recently is taking images that aren't just like a square or a circle and you know, kind of making them look like a sticker, whether that's in Canva or another tool, and then just exporting them as like a PNG with a transparent background. And so when you put it on your website, it ends up looking like a sticker. And that is super fun. And I think could be really cool for Y2K as well. And I know we also mentioned the scrolling block for some of that motion. So yeah, those are all great recommendations as well, Mikki.
That's a great idea.
Going back to this question of trendy versus traditional, you know, using these design trends. I've got a question from Freya. Trends are fantastic to know, but if you're going with the trends, aren't you in turn making your brand stand out less? What do we think about that?
What I think about that is that often familiarity breeds pleasure. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon in humans. So it is helpful to give people some things that they can understand that are in conversation with their understanding of the world. It can serve as a mnemonic and it can make people like you more. I would say it's important to balance trend and personal expression. And generally to be ahead of the trend cycle whenever possible, to do it before everyone else starts doing it. So people kind of aren't bored of it yet.
Like they say about...
I just said like Olivia Rodrigo with Sour over a year ago now doing the Y2K thing.
She knew. She started it.
She's somebody who's on top of the trends. And I think that, you know, we started this conversation between me and Sarah talking about music. Musicians are people, I think, who have a good sense of that. So we got a question from Sharon Reeves. These trends seem geared towards graphics. I rely on images for my storytelling. Thoughts on how best to incorporate these trends into sites rich in imagery?
I mean, there is no graphic without imagery. I think that shape masks on images are a good way to sort of like get images into those shapes that are trendy. I think like a very simple, small, laid back caption would be very brutalist, as opposed to a caption that's like not quite so legible, and a display typeface would be a little more rave. I think as far as imagery goes, any of these trends can be applied to art direction, into shoot planning, just as much as they can to site design. Just with props, with sets, with ambiance, with sort of a larger as sort of like wide angle lens toward any of these trends. You can carry it into the pictures you take and share.
Right. You let it sort of sit with you for a while and then integrate it into your own brand, your own style, your own understanding of your client's brand and style. I like what you said, that they're kind of in conversation with the stuff that you already have. See, next question. If you design a site that is trendy, will it be outdated in the near future and become outdated versus something more classic and timeless? What's the conversation between the classic and timeless? I mean, it seems like some of these trends are already kind of building upon what's classic and timeless. What's the danger there? What's the risk?
Well, you'll notice a lot of trends that we discussed today are things that were really in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and have come back around. So the idea of trends being like purely ephemeral is not something I subscribe to so much. But I would say, if you're looking to design something that you don't want to update, I think it's key to privilege the timeless over the trendy, and to look at something and think, would I like this if, you know, it wasn't all over the place right now? Would I still think it was beautiful if I was the only one doing it? And if the answer is yes, then go for it.
Nice.
We have just one more question left, and it's good because we're actually just at the verge of our time together ending. Maybe a couple of other questions we can take, and probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions. Let's see. We've got someone. Brad is asking, when you're working to sell templates, would you hide the fact that you're older? He's saying, coming forward saying that he's in his 70s. And since you're selling to much younger people, some might value the lifelong design maturity, some might not. Does the age of the seller get mixed in with the types of trends that they're adding to their websites and talking about?
I think honesty is the best policy. And if you want clients who appreciate your sort of visual ethos and approach, then it's important to make sure that what that is clear to them out the gate.
I completely agree with that. And I would even add an additional layer to the honesty and just the authenticity to your brand, that I think that, you know what, Brad and anybody else who of any age, if you don't feel comfortable with any of these design trends, don't use them. I think that they're there for you to just understand what's out there, but there's both a million ways to incorporate Y2K imagery into your sites, and a million ways not to do that, to find other things that you're doing. So I completely agree with you, Mikki, that honesty is the best policy, and your ultimate goal is to present something that you feel good about and you're authentic about in your work. I would love to end with this question, at least the Q&A portion, because we've got just about 5 minutes to wrap all of this up. But this question comes from Kelsey, week of the website, friend of the show. What's a trend you hope to see in 2023 and beyond? Mikki, this is your chance to talk about some of your other trends, some of the other things that you're thinking about, and even just look into your crystal ball. Tell us beyond. What's going on in the future?
Well, I was hoping someone would ask. I would love to see some more analog media divesting from the screen with like really cross-disciplinary processes of making. I want to see some collage. I want to see some like ceramics photographed. I want the shadow that's cast to be used as a medium. And I would like to see more surrealism. I think during any time of uncertainty, designers and artists have turned to the surreal to interpret our world in a more palatable way. We're already seeing that with a lot of like strange trompe l'oeil and with a little bit of like funny scale shifts. There's a great Elizabeth Goodspeed tweet thread about the rising trend of surrealism, and I'd be really excited to see more dreamlike reality bending content.
You and me both. So Circle members, you are all the dreamers. Thank you for all of your fantastic questions. We got to close the Q&A now and start wrapping this first Circle Live up.
Awesome. Mikki, if people want to contact you or follow you or get more information about what the work that you're doing, where can they do that? Is it Twitter, Facebook, Be Real, MySpace, Tumblr? Where can they find you?
That's a great question. I have a number of accounts. I would love to talk to any of you guys on any of them. I would love to hear your questions and maybe to ask you some of my own. My website is, I will send you some links in the chat. My website is mikki.studio. My Twitter is my full name, Mikki Janower, MikkiJanower. And my Instagram is my first name with an underscore before it, _MIIKKI. Thank you all so much for your time. And thanks for having me, Sam and Sarah and McKenna.
Oh God, Mikki, thank you so much for joining us. This was a spectacular conversation. I hope you had fun. Did you have fun?
So much.
So much fun. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the chat yet, there's a lot of love in there. A lot of names that I certainly recognize. I'm so glad to see people. Thank you for joining us, Christy. Thank you for joining us. Charisse, Jen Mar, Karen Herzog, Anna. We've got Shauna Gibbs, Tracy Tusher, Lacey Hanchak, Sarah Peterman on our team, Jeremy on our team, Katrin, Lauren De Palma. I'm not going to read through all these names, I promise. I just wanted to get really excited about all the people that are in the chat. There's just some great stuff in there. And as you know, a closing note for this final Circle Live, we are going to be doing more of these. We're hoping to do them monthly. We'll check your email. Definitely make sure that you're getting emails from us. Definitely check the release notes that come out every week, and the Circle newsletter that comes out, the new Circle events page that's on the forum that you can look at upcoming events. We're going to be, we're just got a whole lot of events that we're going to be adding in over the course of the next year. Really excited about the next year events wise. Any other big announcements you want to make, Sarah?
If you are in New York City, we have a meetup at the office tomorrow. So definitely check out forum.squarespace.com/events for the link to that. Would love to see you. And yeah, as Sadie said, otherwise we will see you next month at Circle Live, and one day soon, date TBD, at Circle Day 2023.
Keep designing great websites, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you more. So long.